Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, we're going to be previewing the 2023 Toronto Argonauts. So obviously last year for the Argonauts, such a successful season, winning the Grey Cup, upsetting Winnipeg in the big game. They finished first in the East for the second consecutive year. The year before, they had a bit of a disappointment, losing the East Final to Hamilton, but they were able to get over the hump, beat Montreal last year in the East Final, and then obviously, like I said, went on to beat Winnipeg. So such a successful season last year for the Argos, but they underwent a little bit of change this offseason, and let's talk about it. So first, talking about their biggest addition and loss, starting with their biggest addition, and I believe that is defensive back Darius Pickett that they bring in from the Montreal Alouettes. Now this guy was a playmaking machine, Swiss Army knife type of player that brings a lot of physicality as a defensive back, which means he is capable of playing that strong side linebacker role, which he will probably slide into in Toronto. So I'm excited to see what he adds to this defense this season in 2023, and I think he's going to be a guy that fits right in with this really good defense that they have here in Toronto. Now, in terms of their biggest loss, it's pretty obvious for this team, and that is the quarterback position. They lose McLeod Bethel-Thompson, their previous year starter, to the USFL, and you know, there might be a door open here for a potential return later on, but for right now, they lose him to the USFL, and you know, they have to go into the year with a brand new starting quarterback, which is always a challenge in the CFL. Just very few good quarterbacks in today's CFL. And say what you want about McLeod Bethel-Thompson, but, you know, he was steady and he got the job done for them most of the time on a week-to-week basis. He had some low points, but he also had some incredible highs. And you look up at the statistics, most weeks he was putting up numbers. So, honestly, I think he may be a bigger loss than a lot of people are letting on for the Argos, and we'll see how that is affecting the team this year. Now moving on to talk about the roster, and honestly, I think this is one of the best rosters in the CFL still, despite losing McLeod Bethel-Thompson in free agency. And I think in terms of their offense, I'm a little bit lower on them in compared to other aspects of their team, but I do still think it's going to be a pretty good offense. I have them ranked 6th in the CFL, but I was flip-flopping between them and the 5th team. And mainly the reason why they're 6th in the CFL as opposed to 4th, 3rd, whatever you want to call it. I just think that the quarterback position is just a little bit too inexperienced, and I'll talk about that more in detail in a second. But at the end of the day, I think the receiving core is still very good, one of the deeper units in the league. Despite not having, you know, Curly Gittens Jr. is a good number 1 receiver. I don't think he is the best wide receiver in the CFL or anything. So maybe they don't have that superstar guy, but Curly does a little bit of everything, can be that lead guy, and you saw that the last couple of years for the Argos. And then you have other guys like Markeith Ambles around the organization as well. So I think the wide receiving core is pretty well set for the Argos going into the season. It's been a deep unit each of the last couple of years. I think that the offensive line has a lot of talent, one of the deeper offensive lines that we see in the CFL right now. And then in the backfield, I have some questions a little bit about how Andrew Harris is going to do in his last CFL season here in 2023. Can he stay healthy? It's been an issue for him each of the last 3 years, so I'm excited to see what he does. And then I think that at the quarterback position, like I said, is the inexperience that kind of drags them down in the ranking here to number 6 for me in terms of offenses in the CFL. Now, in terms of their defense, I have them ranked as the 2nd best defense in the CFL. I think there's just talent across the board in all 3 units. I think the defensive line room with Sean Oakman, Olarin Oromalade, who I could have chosen as their number 1 addition this offseason. It was close between him and Pickett, but Oromalade, I think, had a really, really strong season this past year in Calgary. So I'm excited to see what he adds as a pass rusher for this defense. Effectively, it replaces Ja'Gared Davis, who goes back to Hamilton. And then I think the linebacking core is the best in the CFL, both in terms of depth and star power. Wynton McManus was just a man possessed last year in that linebacking core. Excited to see what he does this season for the Argonauts. And I think that in the defensive back room, they have some notable players there as well. So I'm excited to see what this defense does this season. I think it's one of the best units still in the CFL. Now, in terms of Canadian talent, I actually have them ranked as number 1 in the CFL. And I think across the board, you see the offensive line depth and talent. You see the talented Canadian wide receivers with Curly Gittens Jr. and others. You have Andrew Harris, if he can stay healthy as a Canadian running back there. I think that, they have a talented defensive back in Royce Mechie, who's a Canadian. And then you have the two Canadian linebackers in Haynock Muamba, who was the Grey Cup MVP this year, and then Jordan Williams, who they made a trade for with the BC Lions. So I think that it's going to be a very strong aspect of this team this year. I think that the Canadian depth is really going to propel them to a lot of wins this year, and I think it did last year as well. I think it's been one of the better units in the league in terms of Canadian talent for a while. Now talking about the strengths and weaknesses of this roster, how is this team going to win games and how is this team going to lose games in 2023? I think in terms of strengths, I think the linebacking core, like I was mentioning before, such a strong group, a great trio. You're not going to be able to get all three of these guys on the field at once, so I think there's going to be a little bit of a rotation there with McManus, Muamba, and Williams. I think you're going to have to get those guys all on the field and have some playing time for each of those guys, but you're not going to be able to put all three on the field at once, I don't think, but that just really adds to the depth that they have of that unit. I think it's going to be a real strength of this team this year. They're going to be all over the place. I think the pass rush looks very strong with Oakman and Oromalade. Like I was just mentioning, you have the inside pressure with Oakman, and then Oromalade applying the pressure on the outside. So I think that's going to be a strength for this team. Just the defense in general, I could have just put as a strength, but those two particular units, I think, are going to be really, really potent for the Argos this season. And then I think the play calling does not get enough credit, especially on offense for this team. I think Ryan Dinwiddie has done a really, really strong job his first couple of years as head coach here. Obviously, he has amassed a very good record, but I think a lot of people have criticized him, just for, how the team has acted on the sideline. Maybe he's not the best in terms of keeping his players in line. Maybe he's more of a player's coach, but I think in terms of actual play calling, he's done a really, really strong job over the past couple of years, especially in terms of that offensive play calling. And then on the defense, they're not too shabby either, with Corey Mace calling the defensive plays there. I think he's going to be a head coach in the CFL soon. So I think the play calling has been very strong for the Argos over the past couple of years. I'm excited to see what they do in 2023. Now, in terms of potential weaknesses for this team, I really only see one, and that is, of course, the quarterback position, and specifically the inexperience of the quarterback position. You have Chad Kelly coming into his first year as a CFL starter. He has started a grand total of one CFL game, which was the Week 21 finale last year. And I think that, he has potential, obviously has a high pedigree, being an NFL draft pick, being nephew of a famous NFL quarterback, but you have to see it produce on the field, and until we see that, I think it's going to be a question for this team and why I have them ranked as one of the worst quarterback situations in the CFL going into this season. But we'll see what happens, as we saw with Nathan Rourke last season. And I think that, ultimately that's the main question with this roster. I think overall, it's probably one of the best rosters top to bottom in the CFL, but I think the quarterback position, if it has success, if you can see, replacement level value from that quarterback position, I think this team is still going to be, right near the top of the standings in 2022. Now turning to talk about the opening to their 2023 schedule. So unfortunately, they draw the dreaded Week 1 bye this year. I've always hated this. This is one of the main reasons why we need a 10th team in the CFL to really balance out the schedules, get rid of those first and last week byes, but I just always feel bad for the team that doesn't have an opening week game to look forward to. But anyway, their first game is Week 2 at home against Hamilton. I will be attending this game in person. Should be a fun one. Obviously, Bo Levi Mitchell and Chad Kelly, two new quarterbacks with their respective teams. So excited to see what happens in that one. And then Week 3, they travel to Edmonton. Obviously, we know the struggles that Edmonton has had winning at home, so Toronto probably should be favored in that one, but we'll see. Week 4, they're home against BC. And then Week 5, they have a second bye week. So they have 2 bye weeks in the first 6 weeks of the season here. And then Week 6, they're on the road at Montreal, so another East Division game there. So 2 byes in the first 6 weeks of the season for the Argos. Honestly, not ideal for a CFL team, because now they're going to have to play a lot of consecutive weeks in a row without a bye in the last 2/3 of the season. But I think the Argos can manage with the great roster that they have as long as they get adequate quarterback play, like I was saying before. Which leads me to my overall prediction for the Toronto Argonauts this season, and I see them finishing with around 7 to 11 wins. So that may seem a little bit lower on the lower end of things with 7 wins, but I think if things completely crater at the quarterback position, because they don't have anybody behind Chad Kelly either. So if Chad Kelly does not work out, I'm not wishing this upon him. I hope he works out. But I think if he doesn't work out, they don't have that experienced backup quarterback behind him to potentially plug in there. Again, maybe leave the door open for McLeod Bethel-Thompson return later in the season. But at the end of the day, I think that, that could be the undoing of this team this year if it doesn't work out at the quarterback position. But if it does, I could see this team winning the same amount of games that they did last year at 11 wins. So I think they're going to be closer to that 11 than they are to the 7. But if things completely fall apart, like I said, at the quarterback position, I see them finishing with around 7 wins. But at the end of the day, those are just my thoughts on the Toronto Argonauts going into the 2023 CFL season. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down below about the team going into this season. And with that said, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.